A very good evening, ladies and gentlemen. We warmly welcome you to another webinar session organized by Lanka Consulting Group. And today we have a very special guest with us to give an insight on strategic planning for SMEs. But before we dive into the webinar session today, let me quickly give you an introduction of what LCG is. Lanka Consulting Group is an online consulting platform where we are solely devoted to help SMEs across the country, across various industries, and we have experts across different fields, varying from marketing and sales, business and finance, technology, taxation, human resources. So if you need a consultation for your business, you just need to log on to www.lankaconsultinggroup.com and book your consultant and schedule a session with the expert. So without further ado, let us quickly dive into today's webinar on strategic planning for SMEs. We have a very special guest with us this evening, Ms. Roshanara De Croos, who has more than 30 years of experience in the corporate finance field, in the commercial and the not-for-profit sector. Her most recent experiences were CEO of the CFA Society Sri Lanka and the consultant in expert panel set up under the Ministry of Public Enterprise Development to restructure state-owned enterprises. She worked in senior management positions heading the finance unit at IOC and regional office in Thailand and in some of the top corporates such as Haley's Group, Maharaja Group, and John Keel's Group. Before we get into the session today, I would also like to inform our participants we'll be live streaming on Facebook at the same moment. And if you have any questions to clarify from Ms. Roshanara relating to today's webinar, you can drop in at the chat box. If time permits, we will address them at today's webinar session. Failing, we will mail you and get back to you with the answers. Miss, I think we can begin with today's program. Over to you, ma'am.
Okay, thank you very much for that introduction. So good evening to all of you who have joined the webinar. And before I commence the presentation, just a few housekeeping points. Please mute the microphones to avoid any background disturbances. And there will be a question and answer session at the end of the presentation. But if you need any clarification in what I'm saying, please stop and ask me. Any questions up to now? Okay, so I will then move on to the presentation. But before I start the presentation, I thought I will share the reason why I chose this topic. A question that has been asked by SMEs in the recent past is what is the use of strategic planning as the plan is of no use during turbulent times such as this? But my answer was, it's a good question, but my answer was, yes, planning is essential. So my presentation today will cover this aspect. And I hope you will understand by the end of it why I say that planning is essential. So I've structured my presentation into 3 parts. First part will give a general background based on research findings. The second part would be on strategic planning itself. And the last part will sum it all up. So let's start with the research findings. SMEs are plagued by high failure rates and poor performance levels. That's one researcher says that. Then others say to ensure sustained development of the sector, it is vital to understand why some SMEs are more successful than others. So a comprehensive reviews of extant studies into SMEs done by these researchers there say that a key determinant of business success lies in the absence or presence of strategic planning. So there is considerable evidence to show that strategic planning leads to increased company performance. Yet the majority of SMEs do not plan. So let's have a look at why. The main underlying reason, they say, is because they are owner operated, and business performance often ranks far behind intangible goals such as autonomy, personal satisfaction, lifestyle. So basically, they have different priorities other than business performance. Then another reason is lack of time, lack of expertise, inadequate knowledge of planning processes, reluctance to share strategic ideas with employees and others. Now, this is essential if you want to carry out the strategic plan effectively, is sharing ideas with employees and others. Environmental uncertainty and turbulence. That's how I started this presentation. Size of business, type of industry, business life cycle and stage of development. So these are what researchers have found as the reasons why SMEs say that they don't think planning is effective. Let me just pause here for a moment, and I would like to ask you all whether you have any different ideas to what the researchers have found. And please, if you are more comfortable to talk in Sinhala, please do so. There's absolutely no issue. Okay, so then let me move on to the strategic planning itself. Okay, so first let's look at the purpose of strategic planning. Now, in one of the previous slides, I just mentioned what a researcher had said. A key determinant of business success lies in the absence or presence of strategic planning. So let's see why he says that. In a practical sense, strategic planning is about competitive advantage. That's what these researchers say. And the purpose of strategic planning is to enable a business to gain efficiently as possible a sustainable edge over its competitors. So basically, competitive advantage, to make your company efficient and to get an edge over your competitors. Because for continued business success, you need to be always a step ahead of your competitors. I'm sure all of you will agree with that. So that is the purpose of strategic planning. Let's look at what strategic planning is all about. So strategic planning is an organizational management activity, which all of you know, that is used to set priorities, focus energy and resources, strengthen your operations, ensure that employees and other stakeholders are working towards a common goal, establish agreement around intended outcomes, results, and assess and adjust the organization's direction in response to a changing environment. So strategic planning is about all this. And it's a disciplined effort where fundamental decisions and actions that shape and guide what an organization is, that is who it serves, what it does, why it does it, and with a focus on the future. And this is what our business model is about. So effective strategic planning articulates not only where an organization is going and the actions needed to make progress, but also how it will know if it is successful. So that is the monitoring part of it. So strategic planning is all of this. And in a nutshell, it is looking at where we are now, where do we want to go, and how are we going to get there. So let's move on to the next slide. Now, these are the steps in strategic planning. So broadly, it is divided into three. One is setting of the long-term organizational goals. Next one is development of plans to achieve these goals. That is setting of the KPIs. And the third is allocation or diversion of resources necessary for realizing these high-level goals. So I have broken it down into further steps. So now let's look at it. Okay, so starting with setting of long-term organizational goals, you need to set the vision, mission, and values. And these must be shared with everyone in the organization so that all know what they are working towards. And it must be an integral part of the culture. So the vision, mission, and values must be shared with everyone, and it must be an integral part of the culture. That's important. Then next comes setting of the high-level goals. And these goals are usually for the long term, that is the 3 to 5 years period of your plan. And before setting the goal, you need to carry out a SWOT and a PESTEL analysis. I'll get into details in the next few slides. So we are finished now with the long-term organizational goals. Then we move to the next step of the strategic planning process, which is developing plans to achieve these goals. And that is where identifying KPIs come in. So I'll go into that also a little later. And then the last part, which is starts with setting of the target, is the allocation or diversion of resources necessary for realizing the high-level KPIs and the goals. So these are the detailed steps. Now I'll go into it one by one very quickly. Okay, so vision, as you all know, is a picture of the future state you want to see your company in, vis-a-vis the company, community, and the world. So it's your vision. Your mission is the purpose of the company. That is the way in which the company acts to realize the vision. So basically, the mission must flow from the vision. Values. Values are the guiding principles within which the company will act to achieve its vision and mission. And goals are the broad, medium, long-term objectives of the company that it aims to achieve at the end of the planning period. So goals you need to achieve at the end of the planning period. Okay, so I've just taken two examples of some examples from two well-known companies, IKEA and Amazon. So let's start with the vision of IKEA. Now, IKEA says their vision is to create a better everyday life for the many people. And their mission is offer a wide range of well-designed functional home furnishing products at prices so low that as many people as possible will be able to afford them. So you can clearly see how the vision is going to be achieved. The mission very clearly states that. Same with Amazon. Amazon vision is to be Earth's most customer-centric company where customers can find and discover anything they might want to buy online. And their mission says, we strive to offer our customers the lowest possible prices, the best available selection, and the utmost convenience. So let's look at some core values of IKEA. Now, there are so many listed here. Just look at one or two. It says togetherness. And they have a brief explanation of what they mean by togetherness. We are strongest when we trust each other, pull in the same direction, and have fun together. So next one is caring for people and planet, and it goes on. So I won't go into every one of them, but what I want to convey to you is this vision, mission, and core values must be shared with all your employees so that it becomes part of their culture, part of what they do. And then you will see a big difference. Okay, so let's go to the goals now. Now, these are setting of the high-level goals. And before that, it is essential that you carry out a SWOT and a PESTEL. Now, SWOT, as you may know, is analyzing the strengths, weaknesses, opportunities, and threats. Now, strengths and weaknesses are all internal. What the company's strengths are and the weaknesses are. So this will take into consideration core competencies of the organization. Opportunities and threats are external. Now, the external environment is further analyzed into PESTEL. So that's the political aspect, economic aspect, social, technological, environmental, legal, and how those are going to impact on the company's business. So these need to be done first, analyzed first, then you arrive at the high-level goals, the goals that you want to achieve at the end of the planning cycle. Like, for example, maybe become a market leader, create and launch new products, obtain strategic partnership. So there can be several goals, and usually it should be 5 to 6 goals because there shouldn't be too many goals. You need to be able to achieve them. Right, so we've finished with that part. Now we come on to the second part of the strategic plan, which is developing plans to achieve these goals, and where setting of KPIs come into play. So KPIs are measurable yardsticks by which progress made towards attainment of goals can be observed. So that is essential, because unless it's measurable, you will never know whether you are going to achieve your goal or not. So it has to be measurable. KPIs can be both financial and non-financial, and it should be within the company's responsibility or power of control. So KPIs can be divided into different segments. There can be KPIs relating to profitability, liquidity, growth, productivity, competitiveness, quality of service, and many others. I've just picked these areas. So I'll just take an example of each one. So if you take profitability, we can have a KPI as profit margin. So when I say profit margin, it would mean, now for example, we need to specifically say that we are going to increase the profit margin every year by 1%, if it is practical. So that's something the company will know. Or we can say, okay, we are currently operating at a 5% profit margin and we want to maintain it. So one of the KPIs would be maintaining the profit margin at 5% level would be a KPI. Another KPI for growth can be growth in turnover. So for that, you can say, I want to grow by 5% per year, or whatever that is actually practically possible to achieve. So like that, you can set many KPIs. So those are some financial KPIs. You can have non-financial KPIs in terms of productivity, which can be yield per hectare or yield per acre. So in tea industry, that's one of the KPIs. So you set, this is the yield you want to achieve. And this should be every year. This is how you're going to achieve your goal. In this year, you're going to achieve this. In this year, you're going to achieve this, and so on. So those are some examples of KPIs. And now we move on to the annual planning and the monitoring stage, which is the third part of the strategic planning process in relation to allocation or diversion of resources necessary for realizing the high-level goals. Now, annual planning and monitoring process starts with preparing the action plan. That's the annual action plan and the budget. Now, the action plan is a detailed plan of how the KPIs are going to be achieved and the allocation of resources that are needed for it. So that will be in the action plan. Then you have the budget, which is the detailed account of the financial resources that are required. So that's the setting of the target part. Now, if I may just expand a little bit on why this resource allocation is being stressed on. Resources are scarce, and we all know that. All company resources are scarce. So optimal resource allocation is essential. Now, if I take for an example, if there are two department managers and they require the same resource of the company. Now, if you don't have a strategic planning process, you wouldn't know to which department to allocate that resource. So what will happen is a manager who is more assertive will get that resource, but that may not be the best place to allocate the resource to. So that's why this is very important. And then you have the next steps are the monitoring process, which is measuring actual results, reporting on performance, identifying corrective action if required, and then implementing corrective action, and that cycle keeps going. So this is usually done monthly, or it can be done quarterly in relation to the action plan, but in relation to the budget, it's usually done monthly. So basically, this I would like to sum up, and let me say, okay, so let me sum up by saying why strategic planning is essential. Okay, so that's what we are going to sum up on. Now, a key determinant of business success lies in the absence or presence of strategic planning. That's what I told you in one of the previous slides, what a researcher has found. Another one is to gain as efficiently as possible, that is, efficiency of the organization is increased, and to gain a sustainable edge over its competitors. That's another one of the research findings I mentioned before. Assess and adjust the organization's direction in response to a changing environment. So that's the changing environment. So these are the three things which researchers have said. And thereafter, I took you through the strategic planning process. So now let's see whether we agree whether these are actually correct, or whether we agree with these researchers. Okay, so first one we realized from the strategic planning process is that it's a disciplined and structured process connecting the dots. Now, connecting the dots means the vision is connected to the mission, it's connected to the goal, to the KPI, to the action plan, to the budgets, to everything. So when you implement the action plan, automatically you are achieving your KPIs, your goals, your mission, and your vision. So it's all linked. It creates shared ownership because all the employees and stakeholders are in it. They all know what the company is doing and they are working towards it. It allows optimal allocation or diversion of resources. So your scarce resources are well used. And last but not least is the annual planning and the monitoring process, which is the constantly you're looking at where you're going. Are you going there correctly? If not, let's make the changes. What are the changes that are needed to be made? So you're constantly looking at it, and the organization's direction is can be changed in response to changing environment. So this is why I say that strategic planning is absolutely essential. And I hope all of you, or those of you who had any doubts, also will agree with me. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Ms. Roshanara, for that wonderful session. I'm sure the management of SMEs who joined us this evening would have benefited a lot from these fundamentals of business, which were shared by you. So can I ask if any of you all have questions to be cleared from Ms. Roshanara? We can open the floor for that now. Yeah. Since no one has raised any questions, if you all have any questions, you can always mail us on info@lankaconsultinggroup.com or visit our Facebook page and drop us a message or even call us at any time. And if you would like to book a session with Ms. Roshanara to streamline your business or to get any consulting service related to business and finance, you can approach us at any time. And I'd like to thank all of you for joining us this evening for this session. Have a good day. Thank you. Goodbye.
Thank you very much.
Thanks, sir.